right. Welcome and good evening. We will get started here. I might need to. All right, let's open in prayer. Well, Heavenly Father, we want to thank you as always for the incredible mercy and grace that you show us, Lord. We thank you for your word, and we thank you for your Holy Spirit who guides us as always into understanding and appreciating and then living according to the power of your word. I pray that your Holy Spirit would fill our minds and our hearts tonight, that we would give you glory, and that your word would dwell within our hearts richly as we begin to know and understand and even act upon whatever insights we gain from tonight's study, Lord. And we give you thanks and ask you to just anoint yourself in this place. And Lord, let us be servants of the King. And we give you thanks for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we are getting through our study through the most uncomfortable book of the Bible. And so we've passed through the wedding night exercise last week. And we are going to look a little bit deeper into their marriage relationship, if you will. Now, this is still a song, poetry. We're not getting narrative account of what happened in their life specifically. These are just little snippets of various parts of their events and in their life. And we saw that with the run up to the wedding and all of the betrothal period or their waiting for the marriage day. And then we saw last week the actual wonderful blessing of Solomon coming to get his Shulamite bride, taking her to his home, to the wedding chamber, if you will, and saw all of the stuff that goes along with that makes this particular book quite famous, if you will, famous for people wanting to avoid it in some cases, and or misunderstanding what I think might be truly the message there. So tonight, and it's a little hard to break up here. We're getting fairly close to the end, but I didn't feel like we should fit everything into tonight. So we'll cover a bulk of what we have for tonight and into chapter 7, and then we have a chapter and a half left for next week, and I believe that we will have some time as well at the back end of that. And so I'm just probably going to add a little bit of 1 Corinthians 7 in there into the instructions for husbands and wives in the New Testament to make sure that their marriage is strong in a sexual intimacy kind of way as well. So we'll finish off with that next week, and then we will begin a new study in the book of Judges to follow that. So we'll do that the following Tuesday. Book of Judges. All right, so for tonight, we are going to pick up in chapter 5, starting in verse 2 of the Song of Songs, written by Solomon. And we are looking at now, sometime deeper into their marriage, there's this troubled night, as it's described in most of your subject headings, if you have those in your Bible. And it could either be, we'll see it as we go, it could either be just a dream, or it could be, that she actually has this, she's accounting or recounting the actual events. It doesn't really change anything interpretive-wise. It just means that she's telling us something that's on her heart, and we should look at it, regardless if it was a bad dream that she was having, she wants to fix, or a bad night, maybe some decisions that she regretted, that she can then go back and learn how to fix those better. All right, so here we go. Let's take a look at this night of the Shulamite, now a bride. We don't know how many, weeks or months or years have gone by, but we know that they're now past the wedding day, wedding night events. So, verse 2 of chapter 5, and this is the Shulamite who's speaking here or writing. I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, "Open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. I have taken off my robe. How can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved put his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearned for him. I rose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh, on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and gone. My heart leaped up when he spoke, and I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen who went about the city found me. They struck me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick. What is your beloved more than another beloved, O fairest among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, so that you would charge us? All right, so multiple sort of people speaking or conversations happening. Again, this can be a dream or this can be a real event. We'll just kind of play with that as we go here. But it opens specifically with the Shulamite. Of course, that's the bride, Solomon's bride, after their wedding day. And she describes an event that occurred after their wedding, but again, no time frame has been provided for us as to when. She describes herself as first being asleep, but then she also describes that her heart, her inner thoughts or consciousness, is a word that's, broad range of meaning there in the Hebrew, was awake. So her head is down and she's claiming to be asleep, but her heart is awake. She knows what her heart is thinking and she's aware of the thoughts of her heart. So the descriptions of the night could be a dream, as I mentioned, or they could reflect the actual event that is still perhaps troubling our Shulamite bride on another subsequent evening, or something that's sort of bothering her now. She's laying down and she can't get to sleep because her thought is remembering this event, or maybe she's remembering a dream. All of this is, subject to your own, hey, what do I see here? It's not a narrative, it's not doctrine, it's just a story that's recounted for us here in poetry form. Okay, but clearly the scene is one of heartache and sorrow for the Shulamite, this wife of Solomon. So as she describes it, she hears the voice of her beloved at her door. And note here, of course, that just because they were married already, and he's standing outside her door, does not mean that she doesn't have her own room or quarters. For those of you who were in our Esther study, or you might remember apart from that Esther had her own house, had her own room, and her husband, the king, Ahasuerus, had not called on her for 30 days. So obviously she's not sleeping in the same room with him because she hasn't talked to him, seen him, been called upon for 30 days. So it wouldn't be uncommon, especially as later on in life or whenever it's happening, Solomon begins to accumulate wives and brides and concubines and whatnot, that she would have her own space. So and then that's the picture. Solomon is either out doing things, or she has her own kind of permanent quarters, and he would call upon her on a given day or night when he is ready to see her. But it's not like, it doesn't have to be like a more modern or traditional marriage, let's say, where the husband and wife would always be in the same bed if they're in the same location. And so, don't read too much into that. She's just in her typical sleeping place, and Solomon wasn't there for that particular night. On the night that she's describing, Solomon, though, has come to his wife's room, and he's, of course, requesting, by coming to her room, that she would open the door for him. So then Solomon communicates his intentions. He's not there for, finding out some other information. He's speaking lovingly and sensually to her. So he communicates his intentions by saying loving words, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. I guess you would probably anticipate that he's looking to make sure that she knows he loves her and that he still finds her greatly attractive and desirable. Now, apparently, Solomon, in his own description that she records for us here, had been outside well deep into the evening or the nighttime hours, because he describes that his head is now wet from dew, the drops of dew that had collected upon him. And so he's obviously not there at 10 o'clock at night or something like that would be my guess, although, fog and, other things could happen. But he seems to be describing that that it's not surprising that his bride has laid down for the night. He's been out and his hair is wet from the dew. And so maybe, my thought process is 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know, that he's out there and he's got this wet head from the dew, and but he's now coming home, and he wants to see his bride. So it's perhaps an explanation as to why he had not come to her door earlier in the evening. And of course, as she's going to describe, we'll see that in a moment, that she's not prepared to receive him at her door at such a late hour. She's going to describe how she's been in bed, and she wasn't expecting him to arrive on that night. So in that case, here the bride, the Shulamite, rather than immediately jumping up to her feet and running to the door, "Oh, Solomon, my husband, my love, come on in," she begins considering reasons why she might not choose to open the door, even though her husband Solomon is at the door knocking. And she begins to describe exactly the condition that she has been in. She's already taken off her robe and has laid down in bed. She's not ready to receive visitors, to go to the door and receive visitors, even her husband. And so that's she's thinking about that. She also describes, getting up and putting her robe back on seemed, at her first thought during this contemplation, to be a burden to her. Solomon had arrived too late for her to be considered to be intimate with him on that night. She's, in effect, maybe considering punishing him. Well, if you wanted to be with me, why weren't you here earlier in the day? We could have certainly made that work. And so she's contemplating, she's thinking, well, I put my robe away and I'm in bed, and this is going to be a real big burden to get up, and I'm going to lose sleep during the night, and can you picture these kind of thoughts going through her head? Sometime there, not really expecting him to show up. And then she further seems to justify her decision, or perhaps her thought anyway, of staying in bed because, I'd washed my feet and did not want to get them dirty and have to wash them all over again. Now, here in our, modern world, that may not seem like that big a deal. Most of us don't wash our feet before we get into bed, I don't think. Maybe we take a shower or a bath, but, it's not like you go, well, there's all this dust and dirt from the floor, and I don't want to get up and walk away from my bed. So this is a legitimate kind of thing. You wash off your feet for the day. It's got dust. I don't know if they had hardwood floors or marble floors or, whatever, or a regular cleaning process, but you can picture that a regular procedure for a person who wants to feel clean when they get into bed is to wash their feet, and then they're in bed, and they're not going to get out of bed unless the urgency demands it. So she's like, well, if I get out, I have to go wash my feet all over again, and look how far that sets me back in sleeping during the night. So you can see she's kind of resisting Solomon's pleas. He's at her door. She's sort of processing, do I want to get up and put on the robe and go through the foot washing again? Then she hears him, though, put his hand to the latch of her door, and I can't directly describe what an ancient door of this season in Israel would look like, but there's obviously a door with some kind of mechanism on it that would keep it closed or latched shut. And so she hears that. He's actually testing the door, but she's secured it, and he's not there to bust it down, or whatever. He puts his hand to the latch. Oh, I see my bride has locked the door. I presume he's thinking she's asleep. She hasn't called out to him and said, "No, honey, go away. I'm not here. I'm not ready tonight." He's just testing. Maybe if I look in and maybe if I see her, maybe we'll make eye contact and be able to have this night that he had been thinking of. So while she's there laying in bed and contemplating, do I make a response to him? Do I not? Do I say anything? Do I get up out of bed? Suddenly within her heart, her heart yearns to be with him. Now he wants to be with her. He's at the door. She wants to be with him. And so even though she's been making these excuses and perhaps pretending to sleep, some of you may recall doing that. I don't know. As a child or maybe as an adult, I don't know. Somebody walks in the room and you're like, I'd rather just let them think I'm asleep, and so you're kind of pretending to sleep, hoping they go away and leave you alone. And so that's kind of what she seems to be doing here, pretending to be asleep. She hears him, she knows his way, she's processing all these thoughts in her head, but she's not answering when he calls. So I'm guessing she, in some way, hoping that he thinks she's asleep and will go away from her door. But then she suddenly decides, no, wait, I don't want him to leave. So in that instant, the Shulamite, the bride, got up and she goes to the door. But by the time she gets to her door, Solomon had departed and was nowhere to be seen. She opens the door, and again, no, I don't know what their house or compound or mansion look like. But she goes to the door, the hallway, whatever it may be, and she's, no Solomon, no Solomon, no, he's not there, right? So he's nowhere to be seen. And this, causes her some sense of regret over not jumping and leaping to her feet earlier. He was there, he was ready. Now she wants him to come in, and he's not there. So when she herself touches the latch of her door, and no, I don't know, she's touching the inside, he was touching the outside. I don't know how it all plays out. This, again, poetry. But she describes touching the latch of her own door, and in doing so, her hands are dripping with myrrh that were left there by Solomon's hand. And of course, you remember from last week, this was all, and the last couple of weeks, this whole sensory preparation for being intimate was real important to both parties, that they would put myrrh on or frankincense or something to help be more desirable or pleasant to their lover. So that seems to indicate that Solomon, even though he'd been out in the night, maybe working, maybe tending the sheep. I don't know why the king is tending sheep on his own. But anyway, he's out there doing something. And he's like, I want to go see my bride. And so he finishes his day. He probably himself takes some kind of a bath, and he puts on some myrrh or fragrant ointment or oil on or something. And she can sense that he has prepared himself by touching the door. This just further confirms, I know what Solomon wanted tonight, and I denied him, but now I also want the same thing from him. So he's prepared himself, to be sweet-smelling for his lover, his bride. But as you can see, she opens the door. She's looking for him. It's too late. So she opens the door for her husband. He's already left, and because he likely assumed that she was fast asleep, he's not going to pound loudly on the door or break it down. He's just wanted to know, are you there? Are you awake, honey? Can I come in? And so he's assuming she's asleep, so he's probably made a new decision. That's not happening tonight. I'll go wherever I'm going to go as a secondary, and I'm not saying different lover. I'm saying, he's going to go to his own bed and go to sleep, or he's going to go back to whatever he was doing out in the field or whatever was causing his hair to be wet from dew. So as she sees that she's kind of got this missed opportunity, her heart leaps within her at the thought of being with Solomon, her husband, again. But she can't find him, of course, after opening the door. So now she's in this heightened state of emotions. She loves her husband. She wants to be with her husband. And she probably feels guilty for her own failure to respond in the right way, in the right time period. And so now she's really yearning for her husband and probably kicking herself for not, responding more quickly. So then she calls out wherever she's at. Again, I don't know if it's a hallway or down the compound or whatever. She calls out to Solomon, but he was far enough away that he seemingly cannot hear her. I think if he was 15 feet away, just around the corner, and she says, Solomon, my bride, my lover, and he, oh, well, I'm right back down the hallway, right back around the corner, whatever it is. So she's calling out to him. I don't know how loudly, but she's calling Solomon, or my beloved, whatever her pet name is for him in reality. He doesn't hear her calls or her pleas for him to return. So Solomon's disappearance perhaps indicates that she had delayed more than just a few seconds that seem to be ascribed here, maybe even for more than a few minutes, as he's now quite far away from the door that he had been knocking on. And it may also confirm that this was all part of a dream, right? Dreams have a lot more disconnected from reality. Like 1 second, in the dream, 1 second he's on the other side of the door and she opens the door and suddenly he's nowhere to be seen. That sounds to me like, oh, it's like a dream. Like she realizes this brief moment of her indecision and now he's gone. So if it's a dream, that makes good sense that he's just simply disappeared. If it's an actual accounting of an actual night, then it would indicate to me that she'd been laying there tossing her head going, do I get up? Do I put on my robe? Do I, deal with all this stuff? And, do I really want this intimacy with Solomon? And then she's, thinking about it. He hasn't knocked or called to her in a little while. And suddenly she jumps up and is like, I'll go find him. And now he's gone. So again, interpretation is quite subject to how you view these things. So, but now she's on the other side of the door, and she begins to search in not just wherever her house is, but in all of the streets of Jerusalem to see if she can find Solomon. But in searching, she only finds the watchman of the city. Now, there's, you may have picked this up from Scripture and other places. Most cities would have watchmen assigned to various shifts or watches during the night. You wouldn't just leave nobody watching for your enemies to come, besiege your city. So you have these various watchmen who are assigned 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. That's their shift, and they're keeping watch to make sure the city is safe. And so she doesn't find her husband. She finds these watchmen, and these men begin to beat her and wound her as if she were some kind of threat to the city, like a criminal or other reason why they wouldn't just trust her. Now, you might begin asking, well, if she's the queen, if she's Solomon's wife, well, that seems really risky to beat up the wife of the king, and that probably would seem to be true. And she's in the city, not outside the city, so why are they beating a resident of the city for being out in the streets, breaking curfew or whatever? They seem to be the violation. This also seems to indicate to me that this is a dream, right? Like these watchmen just, she's asking for a husband and they beat her. That seems like, well, that's a little extreme. And so I don't know, but it leads me to think a little heavily whether or not this is all just kind of like a nightmare that she's experiencing. Nevertheless, the men, as she describes, beat her and wounded her, as they would any criminal or any threat to the city. As I said, perhaps further validating that this could have been a dream. And the watchman's punishment of the Shulamite is an indication to me, especially if it's a dream, that she blamed herself for not responding to Solomon's advances when he was at her door. So again, kind of picture this. If it's a dream, she's dreaming, and she's like, do I go? Do I get up? Do I not go? And then, she goes to the door. He's not there. Oh, I've not been available to my spouse. He's now angry with me. He's upset with me. Let me go find him. Oh, I go to the city, and the watchmen don't tell me where my husband is. Instead, they beat me. That all seems to play in the same kind of dreams I might have. Different characters, different situations, but you keep hoping for satisfaction, and all you get is more regret or abuse by the people in your dream. And so to me it seems like a dream, but it's not guaranteed that that's what was conveyed here. So the watchman also took her veil away. So I don't know why she's wearing a veil after her wedding day. Maybe, again, just part of this dream imagery that she's portraying. But perhaps exposing her as the one who caused the trouble in the marriage relationship. And so, in addition to beating her, it's like your husband's not happy with you, and you're not happy with yourself. All of this falls on you. He was at your door, he knocked, he asked very lovingly, and you refused him. And so all of this seems like more of her self-condemnation for not actually jumping up and responding to her husband. Okay, so she's been beat up by the watchman. Again, whether real or dream, we don't know. But then she begins speaking to the daughters of Jerusalem. Again, I picture this in the middle of the night, at least in her dream. And she requests those daughters. Remember, we saw them at the wedding. We saw them before the wedding, helping her get through her emotional struggles and desires to be with Solomon. And of course, they were helping to prepare for Solomon's arrival and celebrating in the wedding and all of that. Well, now she turns to what was her friends in the middle of this sequence of events, and asking them to help find her husband, help reunite her with Solomon. the one she loves. And so she charges her friends to help her find her beloved, but they're a little less receptive here at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it may be. But she charges them to inform Solomon that she's lovesick. Go find my husband Solomon and relay to him that I'm lovesick. I missed you at my door, and I'd like to make it right, and I'd like to become intimate with you again. And so go tell my husband that I'm lovesick. She's just heartbroken over the fact that they couldn't connect when he wanted to, and now when she wants to. So after all of those indecisions, she wants to be with him, and she really is seemingly very remorseful that she has missed that opportunity to do so. So as I said, the daughters of Jerusalem rebuke her for placing her problems on them. Why is this our problem? Now, again, she is the queen, and they were her friends, so their reaction still seems consistent to be with a dream to me. But why would they, why should their sort of response back to her is, why should we abandon our own husbands to fix your problems? And it's a problem that you caused, right? So here they are. She's like, help me find my husband. I'm lovesick. I want to be with him. And they're like, hey, we have our own husbands, and we're in bed with our own husbands. And why are you asking us to fix your problem for you? It seems to be the attitude that's conveyed there in that section. So, and then they even say in their response to her, the Shulamite, you may be the fairest, meaning the most attractive among women, or the most highly privileged woman in all of Jerusalem because you're Solomon's wife. But they also seem to be indicating, well, we have our own lives to live and our own husbands to be concerned with, so kind of you're on your own. You're out of luck, at least in our help tonight. That causes the Shulamite to continue asking for their help, and she begins to explain her heart and her decision here, basically asking for them to be patient and be willing to help her help her as a friend to find her husband for them. Okay, so that takes us here to chapter 5, verse 10. So, so what she's doing here is she's going to remind her friends how much she loves her husband, how important he is to her, what her hearts and thoughts and minds are towards him. And we'll see this actually has an impact on the way they respond to her after this. So, in verses 10 through 16 of chapter 5, let's read that. So the Shulamite speaks or writes or conveys, my beloved is white and ruddy, chief among 10,000. His head is like the finest gold. His locks are wavy and black as raven. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of waters, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are like a bed of spices, banks of scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping with liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His body is carved with ivory inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of fine gold. His countenance is like Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet. Yes, he is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, oh, daughters of Jerusalem. Okay, so they, here again sets the scene. She's gone to them. They've rebuked her. Hey, we don't have time for your problems. We live our own lives. You are the one who sent your husband away, and he didn't need to. Why should we help you? So then she gives this description of Solomon, and as I said, they seem to actually respond back to the friend. You're right. We will help you. I know you really, really love him, and you're desperate to find him, so we'll help you. But anyway, here's her description. So we saw Solomon giving a pretty detailed description of his bride in the last chapter, on their wedding night. She's now going to give a little bit more detailed description of him to her friends, so that they not because they don't know what he looks like, but because she's conveying how much he means to her as her husband. So he is white. I think that's a description of his untanned skin. We're not talking about, ethnicity here. We're talking about he's someone who's out of the sun. Remember how in the first chapter, or what she was describing herself as somebody who's in the sun more than is attractive, at least to start off the whole experience. He's untanned, and that lets you see that he has a ruddy complexion. His natural complexion is a reddish brown color. And so she's describing how much that means to her. He is chief among 10,000 men. That's just among 10,000. That's kind of as biggest number she can kind of convey, right? About 10,000. And so she's basically saying, no one compares to my beloved husband, at least in my eyes. I don't care what other people think about him and his looks. He's chief among 10,000 to her. And his head is like the finest gold, meaning his head, his face, everything is like very, very, rich and satisfying to her. And in addition, his locks, his hair were as black as raven, and they're nice and wavy. So she's describing the head and the hair of her husband. His eyes are like doves by the rivers of water. I believe that means both of those are considered peaceful, right? Doves are a sign of peace or peacefulness, and rushing or water that's not threatening your life, running through a stream or a creek or a river, is awfully tranquil, or you describe it along with things like tranquility or peace. And so she's like, his eyes just bring peace into my spirit, into my soul. And then the whites of his eyes have been washed with milk and fitly set in perfection. He's not bloodshot, and he doesn't have other kinds of issues. She's like, the whites are just as white as they're supposed to be. And his cheeks are like a bed of spices and banks of scented herbs. Like, she loves the way he looks in his face. His lips are like lilies dripping with liquid myrrh, again, kind of contemplating. She enjoys kissing her husband. Okay, she's desiring to do that again. His hands are strong and impressive, like rods of gold set with beryl, like these precious stones, right? So she sees his arms and his hands as just so beautiful, so precious to her. She wants to connect with him again. His legs are like strong pillars made from marble set on bases of fine gold. It's like, his legs are exactly what she wants them to be, and exactly what are fitting for a man of his stature. And so she's just, again, describing what he looks like in her loving eyes, through her filter. His overall countenance is like the excellent cedars of Lebanon, and we've talked about that, I think, before, but cedars of Lebanon are kind of like the greatest trees, par excellence of trees. Lebanon is known for growing them, and they have good people who are good at cutting trees and making wood things. And so his overall countenance is like these best-looking trees from the cedars of Lebanon. She also says his mouth is most sweet, altogether lovely, because he is hers and she is his. But most of all, she describes her husband as being her dearest friend, and she longs to be with him again. This is after the marriage, and they're already consummated everything, and she considers her husband, whether it's weeks later, months later, years later, I don't know, but he is her best friend. And I think that's one of these great kind of relationships that we should exemplify in Scripture, that the wife is the husband's best friend and the husband is the wife's best friend. They get along. They want to tell everybody how things are going in their life. These are just strong relationship connections. While of course you can have good girlfriends if you're a wife, or if a woman and wife, and you can have good guy friends if you're a husband and a husband, a guy and a husband. But there's a sense that I can't wait to get home and tell my wife how my day went, or what I'm thinking and feeling, and that just seems to be a sign of great healthy marriage, that they have this connection to each other and consider one another their best friends, even though she's had this very difficult night that has not gone well for her. Okay, and then quickly they're going to see that because of her descriptions of how much she loves her husband, the daughters of Jerusalem are willing to help find him for her. So chapter 6, verse 1 through 3. We see their response back. So they say, "Where has your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Where has your beloved turned aside that we may seek him with you?" And she says, "My beloved has gone to his garden, to the bed of spices, to feed his flock in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feeds his flock among the lilies." So you see that immediate attitude change of the daughters of Jerusalem as she has given them reason why she wants to find him so desperately. So having heard of her great love for her beloved, they've already known it, but she's just reminding them of that. And now her great distress in not being with him, even right now tonight, the daughters of Jerusalem immediately change their tone and agree they are going to help find Solomon for her. And so the friends ask, the Shulamite, direct us to where we can search for him. Where might he have gone? And that does come from knowledge of being somebody's best friend. Okay, your husband's out in the middle of the night. We can't find him. What would be like the three most likely places that we can go help search for him? That's, me adding some flavor to the text of what they said. But help us find him. You show us where to go, and we'll go look there so you don't have to go all of these different places yourself. So she answers back and responds that and declares that he would have gone to his garden and to his own bed of spices, like he's got his own bed, and so search for him, someplace where he's most likely to be. But she also kind of responds, look, Solomon has many responsibilities and is probably even in the middle of the night here, oft attending to them, though he is surely disappointed that while he wanted to be with his bride on that night, she had not made herself available to him. So then she reminds them again that she's lovesick in her heart, and lovesick in her heart, and the truth of their marriage was founded upon this very thing. And we saw this before they were married. We saw it once they were married. Now we see it after they were married. That she says, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine." So they're still married. They're still connected. They're still in this great relationship. So the reminder has given her the wisdom now. It seems like in speaking back, and how many times does this kind of stuff happen to us? You're looking for something, you ask somebody for help, you explain the problem to them, and immediately you're like, oh, I know where he is, or I know where that thing is, or where I left it, or what I'm trying to solve. And that seems to be what she's doing. And then she's thinking, oh, he's gone to bed, he's gone to his bed of spices or whatever. And then she goes, oh, no, wait a minute, he's feeding his flock among the lilies. That's what he would be doing. Maybe she just remembered what he said he was going to do earlier that night or that day, or whatever. So somehow this seems to trigger a reminder of how to find her husband, even on her own. Okay. So she does, in fact, again, this could be a dream, we don't know, but she seems to find Solomon and he then speaks to her, or you're getting a scene change, and now we're seeing Solomon thinking about his bride, even though he hadn't connected with her as he wanted to earlier in the evening. So let's take a look here at chapter 6, verses 4 through 10, from Solomon speaking of his bride. He says, "O my love, you are as beautiful as Tirzah, as lovely as Jerusalem, awesome as an army with banners. Turn your eyes away from me, for they have overcome me. Your hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep which have come up from the washing. Everyone bears twins, and none is barren among them. Like a piece of pomegranate are your temples behind your veil. There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. My dove, my perfect one, is the only one of her mother, the favorite of the one who bore her. The daughters saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines, they praised her. Who is she who looks forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, awesome as an army with banners?" Okay. Some of that may sound familiar from like last week, and some of it is fresh compliments that we haven't looked at before from Solomon to the Shulamite. But I think, again, whether they've connected physiologically or in the physical place of one with another, or whether Solomon is off feeding and tending his flock, and he's thinking about his bride before they reconnect, I'm not sure which one, but he's conveying what he believes and feels towards his wife now at this time. And so even though he knocked on her door and he was fully prepared to go in and be with her and with intimacy, and she never got up and answered the door, he holds no ill will towards her, even though his advances were not received. In fact, he offers a nearly identical description of his bride's beauty, just as he had already taken inventory of or observed on their wedding day, back there in chapter 4. She is, and so he begins to describe that. She is his love. She's more beautiful than Tirzah, and the word Tirzah means beauty and pleasure. So she's more beautiful than anything he could describe other than her, that it conveys the idea of beauty and pleasure. And she's more beautiful than the capital city of Israel, Jerusalem. Okay. Her beauty is more awesome than an army gathered together under a banner. And you go, well, what does that mean? How's that beautiful? Well, I mean, if an army is a strong army that's ready to take on its enemy and to protect or defend a city, is standing and gathered together under a banner, and they're ready to go to battle. That's a pretty beautiful thing if your city is ready to be besieged, and yet they're strong and will go take care of the kind of protection the city needs. That seems kind of beautiful. So to Solomon, he's saying you're like an army gathered together under a banner. You're perfectly ready, and to me, a beautiful sight, because that's exactly what I want to see when I feeling these things. Her hair is like a flock of goats going down from Gilead. Again, that is a direct repeat of how he described her on their wedding night. We talked about that. I don't know how beautiful goats are from Gilead, but it could be one of these things where mountain goats climbing up and doing gravity-defying kind of feats is pretty impressive at times. Anyway, it is a compliment. He's for her hair, for her beauty. Her teeth are like a flock of sheep, freshly washed and shorn, so they're well taken care of in her mouth. They're clean, they're bright, they're white. And her smile, again, as we looked at, also a repeat from the wedding night, is perfectly symmetrical. It does what it's supposed to do from left to right. Each tooth has its corresponding twin, and they're properly in place. None of them are missing, which can happen, but for Solomon, that's one of the aspects of her beauty, that she has clean, bright white, clean, and no missing teeth. Also a repeat from the wedding night, he describes her temples being like a piece of pomegranate. Whatever that compliment looks like to him and her, he certainly is describing it as a sense of the beauty that she has and conveys when he sees her. And he then begins, I don't think this is a description of Solomon being married to 60 queens or 80 concubines at this moment. I think he's saying that her beauty exceeds that of even 60 queens or 80 concubines or virgins without number. This is just, hyperbole or, a grandiose description of, he's basically saying you could parade, 60 queens in front of me and you're still number one. You could parade 80 concubines in front of me and you're still number one. You could have an endless stream of virgins from all around the territory pass before me and you're still the most beautiful one that I've ever seen. So that seems like a big compliment to me and should be for her. He refers to her as his dove, again, like a peaceful dove, his perfect one, and he's basically describing her again as the only one that he desires. And I think this is saying he didn't leave her door and go, well, if she's not available, I know there's lots of other women I can have. He's saying, look, he's telling her, I've been out here, I left your door, and I've come out to the field, or I go over to this place, and all I can do is still think about you. I'm not trying to find a substitute or whatever else that you might be thinking. He then describes her as being favored by her mother who bore her. I don't know if she had sisters or whatever else, but he's saying, she's favored among her mother. All of the other women who know her from the town or wherever call her blessed and praise her as being fair. beautiful, as the moon and as clear as the sun. Like she, how would you doubt yourself? He's basically saying, I find you the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and no one can compare. Your mother, your favorite of your mother, and all of the other women, even your competition that you might compare yourself to, they call you beautiful, fair as the moon, and clear as the sun. Like they're saying you rise above them all. I don't know how true that would be, but Solomon is using it to declare her to be his most beautiful, beloved bride, and she should have no fear or doubts that he doesn't desire her. And again, he concludes that description by saying she's awesome, like a mighty army gathered together under a banner. So we don't, again, unless you do more than me, don't understand how all of these things are true compliments, but surely she would have understood them to be that very thing. Okay, so then we have their reunion as they have a mutual love for one another. So we're actually going to see them now, again, whether or not that was just him praising her from afar or directly. We see that they're now brought back together. This whole nightmare, if you will, of not being able to connect one with another is over. So it says, I went down to the garden of nuts to see the verdure, I'm not sure, of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded and the pomegranates had bloomed. Before I was even aware, my soul had made me as chariots of my noble people. Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. What would you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the dance of two camps. So that's a very poetic kind of language. Let's see what we can do with that part of it. Okay, so, in verse 11 of chapter 6, the Shulamite seems that it now is being described as going down to the garden of the nut trees, and that seems to be where Solomon was. So again, I don't know in that last section if they had actually somehow connected, or if that was just Solomon's thoughts and that are conveyed, and now they actually seem to come together in this garden or forest of trees that where he was located. Now she hoped to find her beloved, still had strong feelings for her, like a vine that continues to bud and produce fruit, right? And so that vine was planted. Their wedding night, it certainly produced. We saw that in great detailed description. Their love was blossoming and fruitful and just very pure and fulfilling. And she's this now. Some time has passed, and she rebuffed his attempts to see her that night, and she's wondering, is our love just as strong and growing and healthy as it was on the day that we got married? And so she's hoping that she finds a vine vine in her husband's love that continues to bud and produce new fruit of love for her the way he once had. And in looking for this, she was very pleased to discover that Solomon's love remained just as strong as it was on their wedding day. And I think that's why we saw those descriptions. He talks about, her eyes and her teeth and her hair and her temples and all of that with the exact same language as he conveyed on their wedding night. And I think that's intended to convey to us and to her that he's like, if anything, you're more beautiful than on our wedding night, right? He's saying, you're just as lovely. You've lost nothing. You're still just as beautiful to me as you once were. And I think that's greatly important. Now, she loves him, and she finds him visually attractive and all that. But, I think for a man to say that of his wife 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, to say, you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I love you just as much as I loved you on our wedding night. It just shows this strong commitment to men who are notoriously visual and always looking for great things to satisfy the visual flesh. But then to say, no, wait a minute, you're just as lovely as you ever were. I just described, compare how I described you on our wedding night to how I'm describing you months, years, whatever later, decades later, and you're still that same woman to me. I think that should be really satisfying to her troubled heart. Remember, she talked about being lovesick and desires to be with him, and now she's doubting herself whether or not she's still the woman that he wants. And he's now made that very, very clear in the way that she's found him waiting for her. So before she could process the experience of coming before her husband again, her soul was carried right back into her beloved's arms, she describes it as being carried by the chariots of noble people. Like she's had this troubled night. She describes it like a nightmare. I don't know if it was just a dream or if it's like a nightmare, but she's she's very concerned about her own causing of these problems and not responding to her husband. She's doubting whether or not now he still loves her the way he used to. And she says, before I could even really process this reunion I had with my husband, I felt like I was carried away into my beloved's arms by chariots of noble people. Like she just was embraced by his incredible continuing love for her as they are reunited. So when Solomon and his companions saw the Shulamite, they cried out for her to return to her husband so that they could be witnesses to their continuing love for each other. Not intimately in the bedroom, but they're like, return, get in here. Don't even remotely think for a second that Solomon doesn't desire you or that he's angry with you that you didn't open the door for him. They're like, get in here, make sure you make this true connection back one to another, because we want to see this love reunited that seems to be in a troubled spot here on this evening. Okay. So the Shulamite, prior to this, had her doubts about whether or not Solomon loved her, whether or not she had ruined some things in their marriage, whether or not she was just as attractive or he was just as attracted to her as he had originally been. But now she's encouraged because her beloved desires to draw her back into their graceful dance of the love and sensual pleasures. And she describes it as two camps. The word there in Hebrew is manahanim, and it means two camps. So they're basically saying two separate camps but brought together. Okay, so there's a kind of description of them coming back together as a married couple. No, I don't think they had weeks or months of separation. I think it was just this one troubled night caused her all this doubt and grief, and now they're brought back together like these two sensually pleasurable camps that's described there in the meaning of the word in the Hebrew. Okay. And then we'll close out for this night with the final section there in chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. Solomon, once again, is going to enjoy his wife's beauty. Now they're reunited, fully reunited. And he's going to, again, describe some sexual intimacy that he's going to have. It's not as graphic as last week, not as graphic as the wedding night. But there's a couple of repeats there. And yes, he will talk about her breasts. And so we're going to see them come back together in this blessed reunion when she felt like maybe things had gone in a troubled way because of her rejection or failure to respond quickly to him. So chapter 7, verse 1, Solomon speaking of his bride, and I think directly in relationship to her, and again, probably as they're being ready to be sexually intimate again. He says, "How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, and the work of the hands of a skillful workman. Your navel is a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Your two breasts are like the two fawns, twins of a gazelle. And your neck is like an ivory tower, and your eyes are like pools of Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon, which looks towards Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. A king is held captive by your tresses. How fair and how pleasant are you, O love, with your delights. This stature of yours is like a palm tree, and your breasts like its clusters. I said, I will go up to the palm tree. I will take hold of its branches. Now let your breasts be like the clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and the roof of your mouth like the best wine. The wine goes down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of sleepers. Well, again, being intimate, just a couple of moments of uncomfortableness, if anything. All right. So here's Solomon describing them returning to true intimacy, just like he wanted when he was standing outside her door, and she didn't need to have this troubled night and encounter with the watchmen and the daughters of Jerusalem and all the self-doubts and fears, but now they're together, and he's describing their intimacy once again. He hasn't talked about her feet yet that I recall, so he says her feet are beautiful in sandals, and she exemplifies royalty in her conduct. So he's now dropped down to the feet, and he appreciates her feet. Remember, she was worried, I wash my feet, and if I get out of bed, they're going to get dirty again, and, we don't know where, all the things that have transpired, but he's like, your feet are beautiful in sandals. Yeah, there might be some dust and dirt on them, because how can you avoid it? We live in a seat where there's, dirt everywhere, but her feet are just beautiful. And they convey her wherever she walks to and goes, as if she is royalty, which she is. He then also describes the curves of her thighs to be like jewels skillfully carved by artisans. Again, I don't think he described her feet or her legs on the wedding day, but here he's describing how much he loves her thighs and skillfully carved by artisans, and that makes me think they're probably in their bedroom, because I don't think there was short skirts and things like that in ancient Israel. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't picture that. And so if he's able to visually describe her thighs, I think that means they're probably in bed. Take your own opinions on those. Her navel is like a rounded goblet. I think he's telling her Solomon would enjoy drinking any blended beverage directly out of her navel. Okay, whether that sounds romantic or pleasing to you, I don't know, but he's saying, look, I love everything I see with you, right? And so your navel is like a blended beverage, a goblet used for blended beverages. And so he's just describing her beauty in a way that makes sense to him and hopefully is a compliment and a blessing to her. Her waist is like a heap of wheat surrounded by lilies. Again, think of it as a compliment, please. Her body fully satisfies Solomon, who desires her as much as he did on their wedding day. So whatever he's describing here, wheat is, can have its beauty. And he's saying, but then surrounded by lilies, that has been kind of a description of other available women. And he's saying, your hips, your waist are like this heap of wheat. It's like it's separate from, it's different from all of the other lilies, all the other women out there in the field. And again, he's saying, I desire you. I desire what I see in you, in your body. I don't desire the other women of the city. Then he moves up from, feet. He's now, on the wedding day, you might recall, he kind of seemed to go from head down. And here on this particular night, he started at the feet and he's working his way up. So now he's reached the breasts again. And her breasts are like two fawns, the twins of a gazelle. You might recall that's, the softness of a young doe and twins, so they seem to be quite symmetrical or identical. Then he moves up from there fairly quickly. Her neck is like an ivory tower once again, beauty and form. It's like this, again, it's suited for its purpose of holding her wonderful, lovely head upon its shoulders. Her eyes are captivating like the pools of Heshbon by the gate of Bath Rabim. Her nose is like a work of beauty, like the Tower of Lebanon looking towards Damascus. Again, I don't think he's trying to say anything about the size of her nose being out of proportion. He's saying that your nose is just absolutely beautiful, and it's fit for its purpose, and it's lovely to see. I don't want to see I don't think I would find a woman's face attractive without a nose. So he's saying it's perfectly where it belongs, a perfect nose on a perfect face, and he's complimenting her in all of those things. Her head is like a beautiful crown, as eye-catching as Mount Carmel. Okay, so her head is beautiful. We get that. Her hair is like purple. No, I don't think she dyed her hair purple, as some women do. But purple is very rare, very much an expensive, luxury item in this culture. And so he's not saying her hair is a particular color. He's saying it's so valuable and precious, and no one else has hair quite as unique and beautiful as you have. The king is held captive by her beautiful hair all on its own. And I can understand that. I mean, hair has a big part, in the glory and the beauty of a woman. And so he's held captive by her beauty and the beautifulness of her hair. He says the Shulamite is fair and pleasant in every way. She's a delight both to see and to be with. And then he kind of steps back again and talks about the stature of her whole body is like a palm tree, pleasant to behold, producing this feeling, I believe, of tranquility. Why use the image of a palm tree? I don't know about Solomon, but I think of palm tree, I think of beaches, and I think of tropics, and I think of nice weather, and all these things. And I think that might be the same kind of thing that he's describing here, like this wonderful, tranquil, peaceful place to be. Seeing her body is just that, kind of positive endorphin emotions that you might experience being on the most beautiful beach in the world. Her breasts are like the clusters of coconuts, perhaps describing her being ready to produce sweet, satisfying milk. Yes, they're used for babies and nursing and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean that men never partake of that. And so he sees whether he's suggesting that he would like to partake of her actual producing milk, or if he's saying those breasts are beautifully suited to do the job that a mother does when she has an infant child. They're beautifully suited for that. God gave you this design, and I can't wait to see how you're going to use them for the very purpose that God designed them for. So Solomon telegraphs, I believe, that he's going to go up to the coconuts, where the breasts are, right, of this beautiful palm tree that describes her whole body as being, and he's going to take hold of the branches from which they hang, and he's going to secure his position upon her body. I think that means he's ready to be intimate with her sexually. Now, once he's there, Solomon announces that her breasts will be like grape clusters on the vine, sweet and satisfying treat for him to enjoy. He seems to be very captivated by that area of the body based on chapter 4 and now chapter 7. We'll leave it at that. All right, the fragrance of her breath is pleasing to him, like apples, and the roof of her mouth is like the best wine to him, an oral pleasure that exceeds all other things that he may taste or experience. Now, obviously, this is poetic language and all that goes along with that, but he's trying to compliment his bride. He's trying to describe how much he desires to be with her, and that her whole body, frame, from top to bottom, as well as her inner heart and being, is absolutely satisfying to him, which again does certainly cause us, some level of remorse when we think about Solomon ultimately having 700 wives and 300 concubines. This Shulamite should have just been everything to him and stayed that way. But that's not the point of this particular book of the Bible. Okay, and then note finally here that Solomon is absolutely enraptured by his Shulamite bride, hopefully even long after their wedding night. And even after seemingly being rejected, himself being rejected by her when he first sought intimacy earlier on that evening, or whenever it was that he had come to her door. Again, we don't know exactly the time frame here, but the story is just beautiful. Again, a beautiful picture, and we're seeing the whole intimate marriage relationship develop from chapter 1, when he knows that she's going to be his bride, waiting for their consummation, for their wedding day to come, even though they're both anxiously waiting for it to come. Then last week in chapter 4, we see them actually on their wedding night. And then we see this troubled dream. Hey, you know what? Marriages come into some pitfalls, and they have some struggles, and there's some misunderstandings that might happen, but they don't have to redefine the marriage. In fact, the marriage can come back and be fully reunified, and can even be even more intimate and intense than it was on the wedding day if the couples are both committed. The couple is both committed to that relationship. And so you're seeing this progression of this marriage all the way through. And that's why I believe we have this in our scriptures, is marriage, the family and marriage, a husband and a wife, is the most important institution that God created. And we need to make sure that we understand the way it should work. And I think that's what we're seeing. Here's how it should work in betrothal periods or in an engagement period. Here's what a wedding night can be blessed by God, even through sexual intimacy. You can have struggles in a marriage, but get through those struggles, and do that by reconfessing your love and attraction one for another, and then come together again and make that intimacy and that marriage strong and healthy going forward, because that's how you best honor God as a husband. That's how you best honor God as a wife, is to be in the marriage that God designed it to be from the wedding day to till death do us part, kind of thing. So, all right, with that, we'll close. Next week, like I said, we'll finish off the last chapter and a half, see the conclusion of all these things. And like I said, I'll probably throw in a couple of other things, at least from 1 Corinthians 7, helping to contextualize the whole study a little bit further. So with that, have a wonderful evening. Thank you.